All right. Thank you, Mr. Christian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Senator John Bonasek.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Morning, Senator.
Who are you picking in the Super Bowl? Broncos or the Panthers?
That sounds like a trap question.
Not really. You mean these other questions weren't trap questions? All right, you won't have to answer that.
Well, am I going to penalize myself if I tell you that I'm a 29-year Jets fan?
I always felt that the need for affordable housing was insatiable, and affordable means different things to different people. Let's just say in the last 6 years, we're always saying, or the governor's announcing billions here, millions there, affordable housing, rehabilitation, and I was surprised when Assemblyman Wright asked the question of the $100 million. You said $40 million was going for security.
Correct.
And that was a very interesting fact to me. But do we have statistics that would tell us, on one side, what we allocated for budget for new affordable housing, and how many affordable housing units were actually created, the amount for rehabilitation of affordable units, and how many were actually created, and how much was spent for security in each of the last 6 years, and how they were allocated geographically. Is that information accessible? Does it have to be developed? Can I go somewhere and find that bottom line to that question?
So in general, we, as I'm sure you would expect of us, try to be as transparent as we can about the work that we do, where the money is spent, and how it's developed. If you're asking about the aggregation of that specific data, what I'd ask you to do is I will come back through my staff to you and see what we can supply that would satisfy your question. The security specifically was a feature particular to the $100 million that you all and the governor made available to NYCHA. Last year was $40 million so far that's been made available to NYCHA for security projects, and that is something that would have been new just from last year, and you wouldn't find it in previous years. But again, we can come back to you with further aggregation of data.
The other question I had, the issue of homelessness has become a hot button because of the relationship with the mayor and the governor. I'm curious, in the last 5 years, do you have the statistics for homelessness in the state of New York? I mean, have we escalated that much? Are we pretty much the same? I know we've had a recession. And how do we compare in homelessness, say, to the other 4 states with the biggest population, if you know? And if you don't, is that something you could provide us?
So, Senator, it's a terrific question. I'm resisting my urge to pretend that to say what I think I know, in the interest of not giving you wrong information. I can tell you that the statistics are pretty broadly available, primarily from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, and we've spent a lot of time with them over the last several months as we helped work with the governor, my colleagues, and I to develop this homelessness action plan, the $10 billion plan that was announced at the State of the State and is contained in this budget. I can tell you that the numbers are stunning. They certainly don't go down. They maybe vary a bit from year to year, but particularly in New York City, they are as high now as they have been. The same is true, by the way, in some of our other large cities. Los Angeles has a terrible homelessness crisis. They've actually declared it an official crisis, I believe, which enables them to take certain emergency measures. So we can certainly provide you with what they call the HUD point-in-time statistics that will show you exact numbers on a countrywide basis.
Thank you, Commissioner, and after this hearing is over, you can answer my first question. Thank you very much.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Assemblyman Cusick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, it's good to see you. I want to thank you also in your past position, your work on Sandy. I know in our communities you were very helpful, and we look forward to working with you in your new role. So congratulations and welcome to the budget hearing.
Thank you, Assemblyman.
Commissioner, I just have a quick, I want to talk about the supportive housing a little bit. I know that there's $10 billion multi-agency, multi-pronged approach in the governor's budget. I want to applaud the governor and yourself for putting the money towards the issues of homelessness. And also I see in the testimony about homelessness and people with special needs. I'd like to focus on that part of it also. I know that we are facing a crisis when it comes to the homeless issue all over the state of New York, in every community. I think, as you mentioned in your testimony, it does not matter what community, we're all getting hit with the crisis of homelessness. I think also a crisis that is down the road that we should start facing now is the issue of developmental disabilities, folks for supportive housing. Right now you have many people with developmental disabilities who live at home with elderly parents, and as the parents are getting older, they're getting worried what's going to happen to their adult children and housing issues. And I think that's the next crisis that the state's going to be facing. Could you just tell me, in that $10 billion, is there allocations yet, or is that still in the process of working with other agencies? I know this will come up in the mental health hearings, but I wanted to bring it up in this hearing also.
Assemblyman, thanks for your question. You also provided the answer. When we say it's a multi-agency approach, it really is truly a multi-agency approach. The last several months have seen an absolutely extraordinary amount of cooperation between all of the agencies of the state government that are responsible for different parts of this, what is an extraordinarily complicated problem, driven obviously by the governor's own commitment to trying to attack this crisis across the state. You point to one part of the problem, which is sort of a wave it's already broken a little bit, but is absolutely getting ready to break further, which is the problem of people who are doubled up, people who are living in circumstances that really aren't sustainable, and there may be a paycheck or half a paycheck away from being out on the street. And that's why, frankly, that's why the governor thought now was the time to announce this plan, to make it fully funded, to make it clear. To make clear that he's got not only a 1 or 2 or 3, but a 5-year and really a 15-year commitment to fighting this crisis statewide.
Great. As we move forward and we have further budget hearings, again, I want to put it on the radar concerning the issue of people with disabilities and the supportive housing need. As we move forward, I think that when we're allocating the money, that we start doing it now, because again, I think it is going to be a crisis down the road.
I agree with the Assemblyman, and you should take comfort in the fact that one of the missions, that one of the directions that the governor has given us, those of us who are working on this crisis, is to use as much data as there is available. I talked earlier with I think Senator Bonasek, or I can't remember, responded to a question about the homelessness numbers. We are looking everywhere we can for every piece of data available to us about the nature of homelessness and the causes of homelessness, because it's a root and branch issue. We have to attack it everywhere it goes and do it in the most intelligent way possible. We can't make enough funds available to solve homelessness, but we can sure do better than we have done using as much data as there is out there.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Liz Krueger.
Hi. Thank you, Commissioner. Following up on probably a whole series of questions already. Did you define what the state will call affordable housing in its $10 billion, 100,000 unit assignment? What's the definition that will be used of affordability? Often it's a percentage of AMI.
Sure. Well, we rather than talk about affordability, we talk about which income, as you know, which income band. So affordable, what we consider to be housing that's affordable to the low, the very low, and the extremely low income is those who are at 60, and I think below that it goes 40 or so, or 20, 30, I don't know the exact bands. Affordability is generally, I think, considered to mean whether it's a rent burden, right? So if you are at a, say, 60% in your 60% of AMI, of local AMI, are you required to pay rent that is more than X percentage of the income that's available to you for all uses? I can't tell you sitting here what number of, what the percentages are of people in our plan, in terms of how rent burdened people are and how much of those we're going to remove from their burdens in order to put them into our new housing, but that is the concern.
And given the limitations of 10 billion sounds like a lot of money to you and I, but when you do the math for 100,000 units, it's actually not so much money. So do you think spending $800,000 per unit to produce affordable housing is a reasonable number?
Well, it's actually, I'm going back now to my private sector days. My math brain is kicking in. It really, the mix of 100,000 units doesn't lend itself to that kind of division. So you'll remember we've talked about geographic diversity. We've also talked about new construction and preservation. We also have a diverse number of programs, as you're well aware, that we spend that money through. So we do everything from very large multifamily development, typically in New York City, but also elsewhere, to single family we make available to first-time homeowners who are low income, the opportunity to own single-family homes in anywhere in New York, and that is also part of our mission. It's included in that 100,000. The costs of those different programs, the costs of those different units, are dramatically different one to the other, and even on the same block. So it really doesn't lend itself to that kind of math.
I agree with you. I asked you the question because the Furman Center did a recent report showing that the 421A program in recent years has cost $833,000 per unit of affordable housing. So while there are differing opinions about what happens now that the program has seen a demise, I would argue not spending $833,000 per unit of affordable housing is probably not a terrible thing, and we can come up with better models. That's my rhetorical response there. Do you define housing and building housing as economic development?
Oh, absolutely, Senator. Not only is the construction or preservation of housing itself economic development, because of course it creates jobs, it creates good jobs, good paying jobs typically, and it attracts people into communities that perhaps were in desperate need of them, and upgrades the whole housing stock. And there's a wealth of academic work that shows that when you upgrade housing stock on a particular block, the whole community revives, and it's actually scientifically shown how many, within how many blocks you get to see that revival over time. I should also say that much of the work that our agency does, and this is what Senator Young made reference earlier to my day spent traveling her district, much of the work that we do through our grant programs looks in some ways more like economic development than it does, strictly speaking, like housing. We run the Community Investment Fund program. We run a program called Restore. We have, out of our Office of Community Renewal, we have a number of programs that go directly to things like storefront and Main Street development, all related to housing because we try to pair them up intelligently, but all absolutely core to economic development and community development.
I agree. I'm hoping that he was misquoted, but in a newspaper story this weekend, the governor said that his reason for creating a PCB-like system to approve grants going forward was because he saw too much of it going to housing and not enough to economic development. So I'm hoping we can both explain to him housing is economic development. It's not a competition between the two. Where am I in time? I can't see a clock. I'm sorry.
0.
I'm at 0. I'm going to need a second round. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Assemblywoman Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for your testimony today. I just have a couple of questions. One of them is as it relates to NYCHA. Brooklyn is officially reported as the most unaffordable housing market in America. But we do have a number of affordable housing units, and most of them are housed in NYCHA developments. And listening to your commitment and the governor's commitment to affordable housing, it's alarming that there is a zero investment this year in NYCHA considering, it's the only level of affordability, at least real affordability that most people have. So I'm just concerned as to why there is no reinvestment.
Assemblyman, you're exactly right about the importance of NYCHA as it's a critical part of the city's affordable housing stock and has been for decades. The $100 million that Assemblyman Wright referred to earlier was an important and new investment in NYCHA's well-being. But the fact is, NYCHA has, and NYCHA's management I know well, they have a tremendously difficult job and a very complex financial structure. But the fact is, NYCHA has some work to do in making sure that it spends the money that it does have available to it quickly and efficiently. And I think one of the governor's concerns, my guess is that we make the $100 million available to them in last year's budget. We want to see it get spent well, which is why he's put DASNY in as part of the mix. And then he wants to make sure, and I think NYCHA needs to make sure that it's spending its capital budget well and wisely, that it does have available to it.
Well, I think that we have certain mechanisms and controls that provides audits for NYCHA as it relates to its spending. So I want not to get caught up in being an auditor of how it's spending its money. But I will say that the resources that were allocated, most of them were for lighting. And there are constituents of mine who have slop sinks as their kitchen sink. And we need for the rest of the money to start moving as expeditiously as possible. So whatever efforts you can utilize in that regard to make sure that those monies are available sooner rather than later, I would appreciate it. The next question that I have is as it relates to the House New York 2020 program. We have a serious problem with providing senior housing. And I was just wondering how many of the housing units that will be allocated will be utilized for senior housing, if any?
So Assemblyman, I share your concern for senior housing. You should know that the work that the agency does already includes a tremendous amount of development, specifically targeted preservation, often preservation, but also new construction targeting specifically seniors. It's it's an important part of our work. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I'm happy to share them with you, but I know it's well over 1,000 units just in the last few years that we either paid for to newly develop or preserve, targeting seniors throughout the state. As far as what we're going to be doing going forward, the good news is that we have a tremendous amount of capital. We have the ability to be flexible with it. I fully expect that a lot of it will be devoted to seniors one way or another. And we'll keep working with you to make sure that your concerns are reflected.
So will this housing program, House New York 2020, will be the new replacement for New York 3, or is the new name for New York 4? Hopefully if we're able to get that. And the reason why I say that is because I would also be interested in seeing if we can add senior housing to the supportive housing stock that we're expecting.
So New York 3 is essentially done, is my understanding. There's a few units left. That was the last most recent agreement between the city and the state to develop supportive housing together. It's done. Our new commitment is not a New York 4. It's a fully funded state commitment, both on the operating and capital side, to fund 6,000 new units over 5 years and 20,000 new units of supportive housing over 15 years. I fully expect that some of that will be for seniors. Again, we're going to be applying a rigorous, using the data that we've talked about, a rigorous assessment of where the needs are in the supportive housing world, where we see special needs, where we see a risk of homeless, and where we see the homeless population coming from. And if, as we expect, seniors are part of that, they will make it their way into our programs.
Thank you.
Senator.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Senator Simcha Felder, who has joined us, and also Senator Phil Boyle. And our next speaker is Senator Leroy Comrie.
We also have been joined by Assemblywoman Simon. Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairs. Commissioner, good morning.
Good morning, Senator.
I have a couple of questions to ask you. Number one, You talked about this extensive affordable housing plan that the governor is rolling out, but no one's talked or I've heard anything about the MWBE component and how that is going to roll out and what guarantees that you can have to ensure that those folks that are interested in being developers can have an opportunity to be part of the program. Can you illuminate any of that program, or has any of that been worked out as yet?
Senator, I'm delighted that you asked that. MWBE, as you know, the governor's commitment to MWBE goals is a core of his agenda and has been since day one of his first term. He recently raised the statewide goals from 20% to 30%, as I know you're also aware. Our agency in the most recent year, when the goal was 20%, exceeded that 20% goal, and with a new 30%, of course, it's our full intention to hit or exceed the 30% goal with our new programs and our existing programs. So I guess the one other thing that I would add is I am particularly lucky that Bill Thompson, the former controller of the city, former head of the Board of Education, et cetera, who was, I think, the chairman of the governor's task force on MWBE, is now the chairman of one of my agencies, the Housing Finance Agency. And so the chairman and I have spent a tremendous amount of time since the day I walked in the door talking about our efforts at the agency to meet and exceed all the MWBE goals that the governor set for us.
I have a follow-up question on Housing Finance Agency. I'm told there's a backlog in putting in applications, and there's a difficulty with developers in trying to get meetings to apply for Housing Finance Agency credits. Can you tell us, is that unit fully staffed, and if there is a backlog, what that backlog consists of?
Senator, I'm not aware of any unusual backlog. Our staff, we have an extraordinarily committed and dedicated staff at the Housing Finance Agency, at HFA, as throughout the rest of our agency. They are in constant contact with the development community, and they move through projects at a rapid pace on a cycle that's very predictable.
Is it a monthly cycle?
I'm sorry, sir?
Do they see people on a monthly cycle? I'm told it's only a quarterly cycle that they allow new applications to come in.
We have regular capital availability cycles. For some of our programs, we have regular capital availability cycles, and then for some, we have what's called an open resolution, where there's sort of an ongoing dialogue about projects. It seems to work well, and since I've been here, just judging from the pace of projects that come in the door and then go out the door after award, I would say it moves quickly and efficiently.
Okay. I represent, my Senate district represents a lot of Mitchell-Lama and properties now, and I'm having some questions regarding issues on the HCR and the timing of reply to requests on complaints regarding everything from the ability to track whether or not a building is still getting the rent control. I have an issue with many nonprofits that are moving in people that have mental illness and difficulty mental capacities into rent-stabilized apartment complexes, creating angst for the long-term renters that have been there, and also taking those apartments out of rent control. Can you tell us what the staffing ratio is to address those complaints that are coming in?
Well, it sounds like, Senator, first of all, you have some specific complaints relating to specific buildings in your district.
Yes.
And I think the best way to proceed there is either the tenants, if there are tenant complaints, we have a very active inbound process for tenants to call in with complaints. If there are specific issues, I would encourage your staff, and I'll make sure that my staff follows up with yours to make sure that we have a good roster of what the specific issues are.
Well, I'd like to do a meeting with your staff regarding two complexes in my district, Hollis Court Apartments in Cunningham Heights, where there's a preponderance of this problem where they're having a lot of nonprofits bringing in mentally ill people that are having problems. Can you tell us what the normal turnaround time for our major capital improvement is, and if your staffing is adequate to respond to those requests from people that are trying to get credit or even acknowledging whether MCI is done? Because I'm getting a lot of complaints also from both sides, the tenants and the landlords, that MCIs are not recorded or not even recognized.
Senator, we have talked a couple times, I mentioned a couple times earlier that we are fully aware that what is a very, very complicated process within the Office of Rent Administration can take a fair amount of time. It can be, like other things that happen in government, frustrating to both sides of the issue. Part of the reason for that, frankly, is that there is a requirement that we provide full due process to everybody who's involved. And I think that if, as anybody who is on either one of those, if either seat that you're sitting in, you would want the ability to have full due process, and due process takes time. In the end, we think that the ORA folks, who are extraordinarily dedicated, come to the right answer. They put out the right, they get the right result. And if an MCI, to take one example, is fully justified at whatever level it was put in or at some reduced level, it's implemented in a way that makes it possible for that building, that specific building, to be financially feasible and at the same time provide housing on a rent-stabilized basis and probably affordable to the people that live there.
Well, I hope that we can get some more staff to ramp up the timing, and also some more investigators to come out and look at the issues as well.
Thank you,
We've
Senator.
put in some requests, and we haven't gotten responses back, so I would appreciate the opportunity to get more details. And if you could send me the details on the MWBE and how people apply and what this ratio is of developers that are applying, because I'm getting, again, back to the first question, a lot of developers are saying they haven't had an opportunity to even hear back from HFA regarding their request for state matching funds. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Assemblyman Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for Commissioner for being here. Just a specific question in and around senior housing. I'm very concerned because the federal government, via the 202 program, has walked away from new issuances of senior housing. And all across the country, we're going to have baby boomers retiring in short order. So I want to add my voice to those who have advocated for senior housing within the 2020 plan, and Assemblymember Walker touched on it a little bit, but are there any specific provisions or programs specifically designed towards this type of housing in New York 2020?
We have a number of programs that target seniors. So we have, for example, Access to Home, as you know, is a critical program for making sure that seniors, where they live, that the conditions there are acceptable to them, and make sure that they can have access to those places that they live. We do, just through our usual capital programs, we do a tremendous amount of development and preservation of housing targeting seniors and restricted to seniors. Even in the short time that I've been at the agency, a good number of the projects statewide that we've approved at the board level have been for seniors. I agree with you that we need to do more, and we can do more, and I would be completely open to talking about any ideas you have.
But those programs would largely happen outside of New York 2020?
No, they're within New York 2020.
Within New York
Absolutely,
2020.
sure.
Okay. So I know, do you have another program, the Homes for Working Families, that's targeted towards low-income seniors? Do you feel that's sufficiently funded?
I think it's sufficiently funded. It's actively used by developers. Again, it's another program that, with the new capital that we've got for the next 5 years, should we find that it needs an additional injection, we will have the flexibility to replicate it or to refill it.
Okay. Well, I certainly look forward to working with you on those. I'm glad I'm nowhere near retirement, but there's going to be plenty of people in my district that need the help. Wanted to talk to you briefly about the state low-income tax credit program. Everyone's mentioned at length that 421A has expired. In my neighborhood, we have a large rezoning underway, the East New York rezoning, that could have relied on 421A. It will now rely on 420C, which is targeted towards low income, and that'd be helpful in the short term. Long term, the city has a problem. But as it relates to 420C and the state low-income housing tax credit, that's how the East New York rezoning will be funded. And I wanted to ask you, to what extent is the program used? And from my experience, it's been used pretty heavily, and its effectiveness. Can you give us just an overview from in your opinion on it?
Sure. So you're asking about the SLIC, the State Low-Income Housing Credit?
Sure.
It is, again, it's like many of these tools, it's very important for us. It's valuable to, it has a particular value with respect to middle-income development. That's often where we find it used throughout the state. It's been appropriated, I think, at $8 million for this year and next year and a couple of years ahead of that, which we think is a solid level